Hitting 140 FPS in Warzone requires DLSS Quality, 90% render res, and texture streaming set to 4 GB. Full tested settings inside with 1% low targets. Quality mode renders at 720p internally, then upscales to 1080p, saving 30 to 40% GPU cycles with minimal image degradation. Balance mode pushes to 162 FPS in our testing, but introduces shimmer on distant foliage. Enemies blend into Verdansk's greens when ADSing past 150 ms. Dropping native render resolution to 90% stacks another 12-18 FPS without the shimmer penalty. The game renders at 972p before DLSS upscales, keeping targets crisp while preserving headroom for smoke effects and explosive particle loads. Going below 85% render resolution makes player outlines mushy during slide cancel sequences, fine for resurgence chaos, problematic for long-range BR fights, frame generation on. Warzone's texture streaming on Ultra defaults to 6 to 8 GB demand, which overruns the RTX 4060's 8 GB VRAM once you factor in OS overhead and DLSS buffer. The result? 200-400 millisecond stutter spikes when the game swaps assets from system RAM during hot drops or zone rotations. Setting the on-demand texture streaming limit to 4 GB keeps VRAM usage at 6.2 to 6.8 GB total in heavy scenes. Textures on weapon skins and operators stay sharp. You lose detail on distant building facades and vehicle paint, but those don't impact target acquisition. Going below 4 GB, the 3 GB or low setting, makes concrete walls look PS3 era and enemies harder to spot against urban rubble. Graphics settings. These settings assume 1080p native with DLSS quality and 90% render resolution already configured. They balance competitive visibility with the RTX 4060's performance ceiling. Display, full screen, 1920x1080, 144Hz plus monitor, DLSS, quality, sharpening, 50% render, resolution, 90%, texture, resolution, high texture, filter, anisotropic, high particle quality, low bullet impacts, off tessellation, off shadow quality, low ambient occlusion, off-screen space reflections, off anti-aliasing. DLSS handles this depth of field. Off-world motion blur. Off-weapon motion blur. Off shadow quality on low instead of off preserves enemy silhouettes under stairwells and inside buildings without the 18 FPS tax of medium shadows. Particle quality on low cuts explosions. Smoke density, you see. Average frames per second tells half the story. A 142 FPS average with 1% lows at 78 FPS means you're getting frame drops to 78 FPS during fights. That's where deaths feel unresponsive. The RTX 4060 with these settings holds 115 to 128 FPS, 1% lows in our Cap Frame X logging across 40 matches. If your 1% lows dip below 100 FPS, 3 usual suspects: background apps hogging, CPU threads, RAM running single channel instead of dual channel, or thermal throttling on a stock cooler. Check CPU temps under load. The 4060 itself rarely overheats, but if paired with a hot-running Ryzen 7 5800X, case airflow matters. DDR 42666 versus DDR 43200 makes a 14 FPS difference in Warzone on Ryzen systems. If Warzone's in-game reflex low latency should be set to on, not on, plus boost. Boost mode forces max GP. U-clocks at all times, adding heat and coil whine without measurable latency improvement on the RTX 4060. Regular on mode caps pre-rendered frames to 1 and reduces input lag by 6 to 11 milliseconds in our LDAT testing. In NVIDIA Control Panel under Manage 3D Settings, set Low Latency Mode to Ultra for Warzone's executable. This overrides the game's frame queue and pairs with Reflex to keep input lag under 28 millisecond system latency at 140 FPS. Higher settings to ignore. Max frame rate, leave unlimited. Power management, leave prefer maximum performance. Texture filtering quality. These settings max out the RTX 4060 at 1080p, your GPU bound at 138 to 152 FPS, dropping every setting to low and render resolution to 70% might squeeze another 12 FPS, but you'll lose gunfights to visibility problems before you gain an advantage from a 64 FPS. The jump from 140 FPS to 65 FPS is smaller than the disadvantage of grainy textures. If you need 180 FPS plus for a 240 Hz monitor, the RTX 4060 won't get there in Warzone without severe compromises. Consider an RTX 4070 or RX 7800 XT. Both hit 192 10 FPS with high textures. But for 144 Hz panels, this config keeps you GPU headroom positive with competitive visuals. Warzone's seasonal updates often reset graphics settings. Build your free playbook for any GPU at betterfps.com/optimize.